All right, everybody. So it's been a while since I've done a video, and honestly, it's because, well, I got sick at the beginning of August, and that took me over a month to get rid of that just nagging, hacking, gross cough. And then I got busy with work. So work kind of had to take priority, and I'm still busy with work, but it's finally slowed down to the point that, well, we can talk about the Jeep. So if you paid close enough attention, you might notice there's some things missing on the Jeep, and even behind me on the back window. Well, yeah, I peeled some graphics off. So I'll explain why at the end. So I kind of want to try and do this in one take, and I haven't really rehearsed this much, but I got some notes. So I'll grab the camera off the tripod here too, and I can show you some things. But so I bought this, obviously, as you know. I've had it for about 3.5 years. I bought it in April of 2019 as a leftover brand spanking new 2018. The dealership had lifted it and put the 35-inch tires on it. It's the Mopar 2-inch lift. And just, what are these? These are Toyo Open Country MTRs. I couldn't remember what tires they were. So all in all, this is as equipped. The dealership even put these lights on it, which they're really, really bright. The light brackets and stuff. I put the winch on, and in fact, let's just do a little walk around here. So I put the bumpers on. I put the winch on. The winch is actually left over off of my JK. I kept the winch because at the time I couldn't justify buying another winch. And I put the rear bumper on as well because I needed to have some stronger recovery points off the back, and I put those lights in there as well. And the lights are wired in both front and back off of the auxiliary switches in here. So when you hit aux 2, I have these programmed to just come on with the ignition off, and then aux 4 is actually the front lights, but I'm not gonna turn those on. So some folks have been asking for a review video here of the Jeep, and I figured it was probably time to do that. So I was gonna go out in the field and do this out in the field, but it's kind of windy today, and I didn't want to have the wind getting caught in the microphone. But so like I said, I put the bumpers on it. This is the 2-liter turbo, the inline 4-cylinder turbo. And we'll open the hood here and kind of show you that. It actually has been quite surprising. I was a little apprehensive because this wasn't the 3.6 Pentastar, but that 2-liter turbo, it flat out gets. It tends to lack some power when you get I-70, you know, trying to maintain speed or pass semi-trucks and stuff up I-70. But in all honesty, this is actually quite a peppy motor. Tons of low-end torque. And really doesn't have any problem turning these 35s unless you're trying to pass uphill on I-70. Otherwise, it's great. The 8-speed transmission plays very nicely with the 35s. It could use some taller gearing, because then you'd get your 7th and 8th gear back a little bit more when you're up at the highway speed, 75, 80 miles an hour. The trip we did out to Moab, speed limits in Utah are 80 miles an hour, and it was working it. I mean, these things have the aerodynamics of a cinder block. If you haven't seen the funny picture floating around of Jeep versus cow, I'll overlay that in the video, but the cow supposedly was more aerodynamic than the Jeep. So average fuel economy on this, considering how much you have a tendency to work the 2-liter motor. I just pulled the stats because I track my vehicles on Fuely.com. And the lifetime average fuel economy is 15.6, and that is over 17,049 miles. So 17,049 miles, lifetime fuel economy average 15.6. And that's with some, like, you know, single-digit fill-ups off-roading, and then highway driving. You know, the best ever that I've ever got out of this motor was 22.6. And that verified at the pump. Those were actually, you know, done math at the pump. And then the average around town is usually around 17. This thing says like 17.4 right now, just cruising around town. So from a standpoint of, as it sits, it does really, really well. Let's do a little inside tour here, and you'll notice that a bunch of my stuff is missing. So I had a radio head sitting up here on the dash, and I had a speaker down here on the side. I know it's going to be a little dark in here with the doors down in the garage, but had a mag light that I would usually leave in right there. And then I had water bottles and stuff strapped into the back here, first aid kit, my CB antennas right there. But from a standpoint of roominess, I'm basically 6 foot tall, depending on what shoes I've got on. And no problems at all. I mean, your knees you're kind of close. I've got this seat back too, just so, I'm more comfortable while I'm driving. But I mean, from an adult perspective, you can sit back here, no problem. So kids, definitely no problem. Plenty of back trunk storage, and we'll open that door up too. But, oops, oh, that's what that was. I unhooked my lav. Looks like I didn't disconnect it. Like I said, I'm going to try and do this in one take. So, you're going to get all the fun. Okay, I still got audio. So, yeah, I've got this seat back a little bit. In fact, let me unhook that thing again, and I've got my CB down there, which actually does not hit my leg when you're driving. So, it's just from an aspect of the way that the interior is laid out, these have always been really nice. Let's go back to the trunk here. Tons of space in the back. I usually have all my recovery gear sitting in here. Sometimes I've got my mini fridge strapped down in the back. I've got power distribution that I'd ran back here because I didn't want to run off the Jeep's internal circuitry. This is straight off the battery, off a 6-gauge wire running into a power distro block. And I got my air compressor and stuff there on the side, which I still got to take that out. And if you haven't figured out yet, then the way that I'm talking, I think you might have figured it out, that if you've been following along on Instagram, this is kind of it for the Jeep. So let's go back to the tripod here and get that framed back right. There we go. So I do have a Ford Bronco on order, and that Bronco is getting built Tuesday, October 18th. Finally, after 342 days of waiting, I'm finally going to get my hands on a Bronco. So the Jeep has been polished up and cleaned up. There's a little bit of sap right there, and now there's not. So I've done I've had it detailed, and I figured before it disappears, now was the time to do that ownership review that people have been asking for, because there's been a couple dozen folks that have asked to do a review on the JL. So let's start with some of the issues. And there's only a couple of lines of issues. So this Jeep was manufactured on September of 2018, and I bought it in April of 19, like I said before. And in October of 2019, I had to have the front steering damper replaced on the tie rod. That was a recall. I guess it wasn't quite stout enough, and people were feeling some like death wobble vibrations out of pretty much new vehicles. So that was replaced under warranty, and in fact, we'll show that. It's been replaced again, but I'll get into why. So steering damper, way down there. There it is. Got replaced, and I never had any issues. It was just replaced to replace it as part of a warranty TSB. In October of 19, I had to have the charging system checked out on this. And if I remember correctly, I hope I'm not speaking wrong, but if I remember correctly, they loaded a software update. So this engine does not have an alternator, which always blows people's minds, but it does not. The 2-liter has a huge generator on it, belt start generator, and that feeds the 48-volt battery pack that's in the back. And then there's a DC to DC converter that charges the 12-volt system, and it works very well. Well, after that initial complaint of something's not right because it was like cranking over real slow, that problem had gone away with one caveat. So steering damper, software update for the charging system. And then in the spring of 2020, after I had been out in the snow and just buried this thing, it was really hard on the winch, kind of abusive to the battery and the charging system. Obviously with all the off-road recoveries, winching is hard on your battery. And since this is a DC converter, I think it can only do around 200 amps at peak. Most of your alternators can do more than that when you're revving up the engine. So revving the engine on this while you're winching actually does nothing. The DC to DC converter does not increase its output because you are revving the motor up. So I had to replace the battery. I cooked the battery. So spring of 2020, it was turning over slow again. I was getting a little low battery warnings and stuff on the dash that would say, you know, your aux switches are unavailable because the system was charging. And I went and picked up a Optima yellow top and fought that battery for a few months before I finally realized I got a bad Optima battery. The guy at the auto parts store tried to talk me out of it. And I said, no, I want an Optima. They've always treated me good. Well, this battery didn't treat me good. So they couldn't take it back. They wouldn't take it back. I didn't want another Optima. So I ended up eating like a $370 battery, which was kind of painful. But I put a Die Hard in it, and that has been perfect ever since. So October of 2020, I had been complaining for a while that the steering was really flighty and loose on this thing. And it was really, it was labor intensive to try and drive down the highway. You were constantly manipulating the steering wheel. There was a huge dead zone in the steering wheel from about like, if you look at a clock, like 11:30 to 12:30 to almost 11 to 1, there was a gigantic dead zone, and the alignment was perfect because it was a basically new vehicle that had been lightly off-roaded. And this thing just fought you driving down the highway, and it was a real chore to drive. And I ended up talking to the dealer, and he said, hey, there's a TSB about the steering box on this. And I actually did a whole video on that, driving it up there, and then showed the differences before and after in the dead zone, and just how tight it was, and that this thing would actually track straight down the road. And that made all the difference. And again, TSB, vehicle's under warranty, so I didn't have to pay for the TSB. They replaced the steering box and put a steel box in it, and the problem has gone away completely, with the exception of the little bit of pull that you get from these Toyos. These MTRs are kind of known to have a pull on them, especially when you've got a lot of road crowns. So you do have to hold the wheel still a little bit when you're driving around town. But this thing would, you could let go of the wheel and it would yank you into the other lane. That's how bad it was. So that problem got fixed. And then September of 21, with a whole whopping 12,000 miles on the Jeep, I started getting death wobble. And everybody had said, and if you've got a JL or you're thinking about a JL, you may have read in forums that the Mopar suspension lift, or the Mopar lift kit, doesn't last very long. Those bushings are pretty soft. It's gonna develop death wobble at around 10,000 miles. And it turned out to be true. I don't off-road this very hard. I've rock crawled it. It's been, it's been to Moab, it's been to Wyoming, it's been to South Dakota, and of course everything that we can do here in Colorado. I've stuffed wheels, and it's been up on 3 wheels, and so yeah, you're gonna wear stuff out pretty quick. And at 12,000 miles, I ended up with full-on death wobble, again under warranty. Talked to the dealership, and they were absolutely fantastic about it, and ordered up basically all new front end stuff. I got a new tie rod, I got the new drag link. I'm almost positive I got new control arms as well, because those bushings were also pretty loose. So virtually all the front end components got replaced on this thing in September of 21. And it's been fine ever since. So aside from that MTR pole that you have, it's been fine ever since. So honestly, from an issue standpoint, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. 5 things in 3.5 years, of which one was software, one was a recall, and then a bad battery that I actually had to replace. And that's not the Jeep's fault. That's me and what I do with the vehicle and how hard I am on the electrical systems of these, and death wobble. So the OEM components just couldn't handle my kind of off-roading, I guess. I'd like to consider myself to be a little bit of a moderate off-roader. I don't beat on these things, obviously, because it's in mint condition and immaculate. So, you know, it's a really, really good vehicle. Let me take you back off the tripod here. And, you know, I mean, you can tell that from a paint perspective, inside, it's cherry. I mean, I just don't abuse my vehicles. I did have some scratches and stuff in the door. There's still a little light scratch right there, but you really can't hardly tell. You know, after a real good buff job and some nice wax, you know, it's just, so, you know, I use it, but I don't abuse it. I've got rock rash on the rails and stuff, and some of that's from Moab, some of that's from South Dakota. I get into the tires, but I'd say from an overall, this thing is absolutely fantastic. And it has most certainly been the best Jeep that I have owned. And I have owned 3. I owned that 99 TJ, and then I had that silver JK, and I had the orange JL. My absolute #1 gripe about the JL, and I think it's just me, and I think it's my, I guess I would say body type. I cannot get comfortable in the driver's seat driving more than 5, 6, 7 hours. It just, the way that it pushes on the backs of my legs, and I think it's got to do with the way that the seat is kind of canted. The JK, at least if I'm thinking correctly, the JK had more of a flat seat. And when you look at this, you can see that it runs back pretty steeply. When I run the trim up on the seat and get it up to the point to where it's almost flat, then I'm sitting so high up in here that my head is like right here almost. And of course you can't see the stoplights. You have to literally duck down under the window to see the stoplights, which would be up about where my heater is there. And this is literally would be my head position, is sitting like this. So that's, you know, of everything and how absolutely awesome this vehicle is. Just the seat, the driver's seat, it must just be the way that my butt sits in it. I don't know. I just could never get comfortable on the long trips. You know, when you go out four-wheeling and stuff with friends and you're out for, you know, you're out all day, you're wheeling and you're stopping and, you know, you get out and you're never really sitting in anything that long. Driving out to Moab was about 7.5 hours. And by the end of that 7.5 hours, I was done. Like, I did not want to sit in this thing anymore. And then, of course, you're there for a whole week wheeling 5 to 10 hours a day. It was a painful trip, but I can go drive this around town. I can drive it to a customer. Heck, I drove it to South Dakota, and actually the drive to South Dakota didn't bother me. But then by the end of the days of the wheeling trips in South Dakota, I was starting to hurt again. Meanwhile, I can take my Power Wagon and drive 13 hours in one day to the middle of Texas, and I'm fine. And that's just a difference in the seats, I guess. But, you know, from a perspective of owning Jeeps, they've all had the same problem. The black one had it, the silver one had it, the orange one here has had it, the death wobble. So out of everything, this has by far been the best Jeep I've ever had. This thing is phenomenal. If you are in the market for a Jeep, the JK and JL are both phenomenal, but this one's definitely more refined. It's got all the goodies. It's got the heated seats. It's got the heated steering wheel. It's just, so effortless to drive with the 8-speed transmission because it's not constantly you're way under revving the engine or you're way over revving the engine. That 8-speed is always right where it's supposed to be. So this is not by any means something that I've disliked. I have absolutely loved this vehicle. But let's get into what I bought, and I'll overlay some stuff here in the video. I ordered back in November of 2021 a 2022, because they were available to be ordered, Ford Bronco Badlands with the Sasquatch package. So it should have similar ground clearance to this, and that's something I'm going to do before I get rid of this, is run some tape measures just to make sure. And I am really looking forward to putting the Ford up against now almost 8 years of owning a Jeep in some fashion. I've owned a Jeep for almost 8 years now, and I am looking forward to putting it up against what I know that these will do. And I'm willing to bet that my off-roading style is going to be perfect match for the Bronco. Maybe with the exception of the really hardcore rock crawling, I think that the Bronco is going to do what I want more comfortably. Even though it's IFS, I think it's going to handle the rocks okay. So I think we're going to be okay on the rocks. It's going to drive down the highway substantially better. Solid axle, even though this thing's really tight now, you kind of wander in the grooves of the concrete if you're driving on grooved roads. The road crown, they follow the road crown pretty hard. The Bronco's not going to have that problem, and the Bronco's never going to have death wobble, ever. So I'm really looking forward to the Bronco. I'm going to do another video when it comes time to actually go pick up the Bronco. Whether this gets traded in or whether I sell it locally, I'm going to have some first impressions of my Bronco that I've ordered, driving it home, or if it ends up getting delivered down here, that's all to be determined. But I've got some folks locally that are very interested in buying this, and I've also got a very respectable trade offer at the dealership up in Wyoming where I'm going to buy my Bronco. So if you have any questions on this vehicle, go ahead and put them in the comments, and I'll keep track of that. If you're not following along on Instagram, I'm on Instagram. It's Justin King Off-Road, justin.king.offroad. I put all my personal stuff on there, like Boy Scout camping trips. I just worked a shooting sports event. I'm going to have, the final days of this Jeep. I'm not going to off-road this anymore because it's been detailed. But I'm also going to have a lot of stuff on there regarding purchasing the Bronco. So check that out. And again, if you've got any questions on the JL platform or the Jeep platform in general, let me know. And I appreciate you watching, and apologize. I've been kind of MIA for 8 weeks, but between being sick and I am my boss, so the boss doesn't let me have too much time off when I get busy. I finally was able to do it. So thank you very much for stopping by, and we'll see you next time.